This first question is from an anonymous. Dear Long Pa, I am a practitioner wanting to ordain. Therefore, I have refrained from romantic relationships. However, sometimes when I meet another practitioner who is a serious Dhamma practitioner and has many wholesome qualities, I find that my admiration for those wholesome qualities and their dedication to practice turns into attraction towards the person. It is not a sexual attraction or lust, but rather just attraction to the qualities of the person. This has happened to me a few times, and I do not understand why, since I know that happiness from relationships is temporary and can be a distraction on my path. How can I understand this or learn from this and practice with this? Also, how can I avoid getting pulled in when the other party feels the same way and expresses interest?
So the building of goodness, merit, parami, our spiritual qualities, we do so through practicing building dana, sila, bhavana, generosity, morality, and meditation. And this leads to happiness of mind. We can call this saga or heaven. And sometimes we will see the dangers and faults of living in with many people or in relationships such as with a couple, with a partner. So our practice may not yet be at the level where our minds want to seek seclusion from others and just be by ourselves and practice. And so to build parami together with another person of the opposite sex isn't wrong. So in Buddhism, it's okay to practice like that as a couple. Our Buddha, when he was building his parami, spiritual perfections, even after he had received a prediction by a past Buddha that he would be a Buddha for sure in the future, he had Yashodhara, who had made the determination that she would build parami following our Buddha. And even though the Buddha may not have wanted that, he himself built, or the building of parami of a Buddha, it also needs to have a partner who builds parami as well. And then that Bodhisattva, or that Buddha, will sacrifice away or let that go, the wife, the money and wealth, in order to fulfill his paramitas, his spiritual perfections. And so our Buddha practiced in this way. So if we do see the drawbacks of the cycle of samsara, then we can go practice by ourselves, and that's fine. We can see the drawbacks and the faults or the downside of having a family or being in relationships in that way. We may see it then that this may be slow for our Dhamma practice if we are in relationships in that way. But this is up to our own strength of mind. Our level that we can practice this dana, sila, and bhavana, and so we can continue on practicing by being very restrained in our sense contact. We can keep the 5 precepts, and we can slowly add another precept on there, maybe 6, 7, and then be able to keep all the 8 precepts. And so to find admiration in the qualities or the good qualities of another person of the opposite sex, that is something normal. and that's, we can call a mind state or object that arises in our minds. And so the level that we can accept and deal with it depends on our own mindfulness and wisdom. And if we don't have sufficient mindfulness and wisdom to deal with it, then we may have to avoid contacting that type of sense contact, that type of individual. And so it is up to the path that you want to follow.
This next question is from Kunjin, USA. Dear Ajahn Anan, is the state of samadhi always happy? My quiet mind is still, but not happy and not sad per se, but more like simply watching and knowing things as they are. Is this samadhi? I have grown increasingly bored or delusioned by the world, but I am not experiencing happiness nor sadness in meditation. I feel stuck. What am I doing wrong? Thank you.
So the mind object, or what arises in the mind when there is samadhi, is having piti, which is rapture, happiness or bliss. And if it's more samadhi than that, then it's a one-pointedness or equanimity of the mind. And so we develop the mind through using a kammatthana meditation object, and this is the basis of our work that we have to do. So we may recollect the virtues of the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, or of our dana, our goodness that we've done. And when we do this, then we get a feeling of inner fullness of heart. We may see someone who's in difficulties, and we have a lot of compassion and kindness towards them, and we want to help them, and we give dana, charity, to help them. So this can be just giving even a little bit, but the mind is very happy internally from having done that act. And that is a type of samadhi as well. So it's not just we do our samadhi only when we close our eyes, watch the breath, or Buddho. Buddho, it means the one who knows, the one who is joyous, the one who is awakened, the one who knows about unskillfulness and goodness. So when the Dhamma arises, there's a peace there, and this gives a great feeling of fullness as the mind's basis of fundamental there. So the mind state coming with samadhi is rapture and happiness or bliss. And when that peace arises with that rapture and bliss and peace, then there's a strength of mind there. And so that you said you're still not experiencing either happiness or sadness, that's still correct. But your samadhi is still small. And so the rapture has not yet arisen. So you need to do more practice. You need to keep going. Have that rapture coming up, or that clear knowing arising. And this is a peacefulness of the mind. If you're feeling disillusioned and bored with things, then that can be a state of aversion and ill will coming up. It's a different type to one who's weary of the world because they see the truth, that they see that inherently it has no substance there in the world, it's impermanent, or that it's from ignorance that conditions or proliferates the aversion, the ill will, the sort of bad mind states, or it's the ignorance that even conditions the good mind states, the meritorious formations coming up. So we can see both sides of it, and seeing it that it is impermanent. And then there's this wariness of the Dhamma, of Dhammas, as in mind objects there. And if it's greater than this, if it's of the other type, the first type, that's just bored and disillusioned, then that could be dangerous. So you do need to have the happiness and bliss coming from samadhi. So just need to put in more effort and keep going. And that at the moment you may feel that it's a bit stuck because you're still relying on your memories and perceptions there. It's not yet, the real or the deep peace hasn't yet arisen. So that peace doesn't mean that it's just listless or in the middle there. There is rapture and bliss coming up. And whether it's mind states of liking or disliking arise, our mind can stay in the middle or away from them, or seeing the object of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness and not self, then rapture arises. So in the beginning we build goodness or build more goodness and get a feeling of fullness and happiness with that. So you can do your chanting and you feel happy, or you may need to do more dana, practice generosity, more charity, help people, whether the poor, and doing this, then you can feel a feeling of satisfaction, fullness there. And this is a food for the mind. We know of the food for the body already, but the food for the mind is the Dhamma. And so if you're having mind states that are very dry, maybe even barren, then you need to build more goodness. And then you'll get more feeling of freshness maybe in the mind because of the goodness that you have done.
This next question is from Lai, Singapore. Dear Long Pa and organizers of the retreat, thank you for organizing and for the opportunity to ask questions. In one of the question and answer, I was mentioned that it could be dangerous for one to get lost in the path. I have had an experience while meditating. There was once I heard a noise during meditation and felt irritated. But then suddenly I could distance away from the sense of unpleasantness, and as it felt external, I was then unaffected. Then the perception of sound felt external. The act of hearing felt external. And the thought of that, the act of thinking, all felt external as well. I feel like I have experienced something special in that moment, but I am worried that I may simply be deluded into believing it's something special due to conceit and ignorance when it wasn't. And if so, that would lead to my long-term harm and suffering. How would I know if I am on the right track, or am I simply deluded by my defilements into thinking I am? Thank you very much for answering.
So before answering, just to talk about this attachment or attachment to views that of vipassana, of this insight, that it can be the kilesas arising instead of clear insight. And so we may think that it is real insight, but it may be attachments. So we may have different things arise in the mind. It may be upasa or brightness, light arising inside, or we may have peace, stillness there, staying for many days on end, maybe rapture for 3 days, 3 nights, or even for a whole month. And so we may even just establish our minds on something and the rapture arises straight away. And we could get attach to this brightness or this rapture as being the path and fruits of nibbana or attainment. Or one may have a feeling of great coolness inside the heart, and this can be a result of our samatha, tranquility meditation practice. Or we may really believe that we've seen into materiality, mentality, rupa and nama as being not self, and we have a firm belief, we hold it very strongly. We see it as really not being us. And so this as well could be a delusion, thinking that this is already the path and fruits of nibbana. Or maybe we have very, very strong mindfulness and clear, we see and have knowing arise. This could also be the defilements of insight, vipassana kilesas. So if these types of things arise, we should think of it or contemplate it as being not a sure thing, as being impermanent. So that now that you've said in your question that you practiced and a sound arose and at first you felt irritated, this is a feeling of disliking or aversion there. But then the wisdom came up and seeing it as just simply sound arising and not having disliking or aversion towards it, being able to separate out from that sound and seeing it as just simply being sound. So one was able to separate out the sense consciousness as being simply just hearing. And this is some wisdom that is arising when seeing like this. So one may see things as being simply processes or conditioned, simply arising, staying for a while and then ceasing. And so then there is a temporary freedom from attachments. And so this, we can see then the results of this coming up where the mind feels more free or liberated from that attachment. When the craving comes up or there's something because of craving arising, then that will lead to suffering. And what you experienced was the suffering of being irritated. And when you're able to see it as just simply being as it is, that it isn't a self, that it's simply sound, then there's the wisdom arising. You can see that ignorance was there arising, but instead vicca or knowing knowledge arose. And then one can put down the sense of self in that thing, in that time. But then you shouldn't also overthink it and worry too much about it. So whatever it is that arises, whether it's brightness, rapture, maybe very strong faith, or very strong mindfulness, or even forms of feelings of merit and goodness arising, just contemplate it all as being not a sure thing, as being impermanent. Or even practicing and attaining to jhana, still you see that as being uncertain, not a sure thing, being impermanent. Whatever it is, whether it's this or that, or you think it's you're this or that, just see it firstly as being not a sure thing, as being impermanent. So this sense of worry that you have come up, also see it as being uncertain, impermanent. It's a type of mind object that's arisen of the akusala or unskillful side that's come up. And so before you had that irritation come up and you were able to know it in time and put that down, but then later on another type of object came up, which is the worry, the feeling of doubt there coming up. But you should also see that as being simply a mind object and also put that down as well. And then that is the correct practice.
This next question is from an anonymous. Dear Praajan, during my meditation practice, I've been experiencing tightness and tension in my chest. I try to watch the sensations as not self, and that helps, but it arises frequently in my meditation. The mind has also been more restless than usual. Is it skillful to investigate the root cause and apply metta as well?
So here we should try to notice first that at the time that we're not trying to develop samadhi, that we're not meditating, what do we feel? Do we feel at ease? We should feel at ease because we'll be breathing very normally, relaxed. But then the time that we sit meditation, we may come to control the breath. We try to just know the in and out breath, but we end up controlling the breath to be more shorter or longer than it is. And so then the mind is not at ease. The body may feel heavy, and there may be a feeling of dis-ease of the body, or maybe a feeling of tightness and tension, like you've said, and so then that isn't correct. So you said that you know and see that it is being impermanent, that these feelings are impermanent, and that is correct. But we can look that this cause of this tension and tightness we're feeling comes from controlling the breath. So we can try to count in pairs along with the breath. When we breathe in, we think 1, breathe out, think 1, in 2, out 2, in 3, out 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, just in a very relaxed manner, very at ease. Then we add another pair, so counting from the first pair up to the 6th pair, and so on. And we can see that if we get lost, then we just begin again as new, lost in the counting. So we see that, does this give us more ease when we try this method? Because if maybe we just only take the breath as our object, we may start to control the breath. Then there's a feeling of maybe stress or tightness, tension there, and that isn't correct. So it may be that we start in the practice and we try to develop that mindfulness of the breath, but there is still a lot of agitation, a lot of thoughts, and the mind's in kind of a mess with all these thoughts. And so then we try to make it still by controlling the breath. So if we do have a lot of restlessness there, still a lot of thoughts, then we can try to do chanting first. Or we can also spread metta, do metta as a practice, so that the mind feels much more at ease. And we can do this for a time of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we go to establish our mindfulness with the breath. And so this actually happens to a lot of people. They go to the breath straight away, and they may have feelings, like you've said, come up because of controlling the breath, and that isn't right. But there's another type of feeling of solidness or firmness or stillness there, which comes up, and it has a very firm type of happiness there or bliss there. The body may feel very solid or very heavy, and one may come out from the samadhi and come out from that peace, and there's that feeling of the raptures come up, and that leads to bliss. And coming out from that samadhi, whatever sense contact there is from the outer world, whether it's the sights, sounds, odors, tastes, touch, mental objects, the mind receives and experiences those objects and does not waver when it contacts them. So this, or there may be the object coming up that we can see into impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. So this is about samadhi, and this is a correct practice. So you shouldn't control too much or control the breath, or it may even be your own defilements that are trying to control the mind to be peaceful, and this isn't correct. So just try to relax, be a bit more at ease. You can do so by reflecting, contemplating on all your goodness that you've done, and this can bring up a feeling of joy, feeling of fullness in the mind, and a feeling of freshness there. And then you can go to watch the breath, develop mindfulness with the breath.